Recently, there have been rumors within the Empire that Duke Elliot Igor intends to rebel and has engaged in a series of illegal activities such as studying forbidden magic, befriending demons, and nurturing undead spirits. Duke Igor hereby solemnly declares that the above statement is purely fabricated and has been handed over to a lawyer for processing. Duke Elliot Igor of our territory was young, talented, and handsome, making him a model aristocrat and excellent lord within the Empire. Duke Elliot Igor never traded with the demons, never raised an army of undead spirits, and never became brothers with evil gods. The development of productivity in our territory has nothing to do with the aforementioned evil forces. Our territory has always respected the authority of the Imperial Emperor and has not controlled the Imperial Court or the personal freedom of His Majesty. Our territory reserves the right to hold the Duke of Elliot accountable in accordance with the law for the false statement that he is a foreigner. I hope that all sectors of the Empire will work together with Duke Igor to seek development and create a better future. 7 days before the rebellion, Duke Igor received a letter to his fellow countrymen in the Empire keywords of the novel. Lord, why did he rebel? No pop-ups. Lord, why did he rebel? Download the complete text. Lord, why did he rebel? Latest chapters for reading. Chapter 1. The Source of All Evil. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The source of all evil. Xiahou Yan looked at the lamp stand in front of him with some trance. The body of the lamp stand was completely made of brass, roughly shaped like a lion, presenting an elegant streamline. The lion's mouth was wide open, filled with lamp oil. A golden flame flickered in the mouth of the brass lion. Lord Elliot. Lord, Lord, someone beside him called out softly. Xiahou Yan finally regained his senses. He turned his head in confusion and saw a young girl dressed in maid attire next to him, looking timidly at him. Big, the maid, dressed as a young girl, anxiously asked as she rolled up her linen hair around her temples. Are you okay? I saw you staring at this oil lamp for several minutes. I'm fine, Xiahou Yan reluctantly answered, trying to recall the name of the maid. I can't remember. It has been 2 days since I traveled to this world, but the memories of my original owner are still a mess. He can only confirm now that his name is Elliot Igor, and his identity is that of a nobleman and food lord in the Empire. As for my age, what is? 18 years old. Are you still 19 years old? Xiahou Yan impatiently pinched his brow. What's your name? He opened his eyes and gritted his teeth. The maid was momentarily stunned, then showed a soft smile and whispered. Lord Elliot, my name is Anjie Randall and I am your personal maid. You have just recovered from a coma for less than 2 days, and occasional memory confusion is completely normal. Please don't worry. Xiahou reluctantly agreed. The little maid couldn't have imagined that the young aristocrat Elliot Igor had already died in a coma, and now the one in control of this body was an old ghost named Xiahou Yan on Earth. Thinking of his new identity, he couldn't help but look around again. Dark yellow cowhide tent cloth, temporary beds and sleeping bags made directly from animal skins on the land, and a pitiful little maid dressed in disheveled maid attire, with a pretty face covered in smoke and dust. Yes, this is not a fancy lord's mansion, but a tent hastily set up in the wilderness. As an imperial nobleman and food lord, Elliot Igor was on a journey with his 500 lords. Xiahou Yan was not clear about the background of all of this, but he only vaguely remembered that it seemed that the Igor family had their hereditary territories revoked by the Empire for some reason. However, Elliot Igor, who took over as the tribal leader at a young age, had to travel mountains and rivers with his followers and migrate to the new territories allocated by the Empire. Shortly after embarking on the journey, Elliot Igor fell into a coma due to illness. Until 2 days ago, Xiahou Yan's soul woke up in this body. Xiahou Yan tried to imitate Elliot Igor's usual tone and tentatively asked. Is the place where we are currently camping safe? And Jia was taken aback at the words. She answered with some hesitation. Master Laurie has used magic to detect it, and he said there must be no zombies within 10 miles nearby. but further away. Upon hearing the word zombie, Xiahou Yan suddenly felt a headache. He frowned and asked, "So, we still haven't been able to leave the undead infected area?" Jie shook her head. "Lord Elliot, Master Laurie said that during the day, our convoy encountered a zombie tide and panicked and chose no other route. Now our campsite. I'm afraid it's in the center of the undead infection zone." During the day. Xiahou Yan remembered the zombie attack a few hours ago and his heart skipped a beat. He asked. "So, how many people did we lose during the day today?" The little maid's face immediately darkened. "Lord Elliot, during the daytime zombie infestation, we lost a total of 102 lords, nearly 70% of our livestock, and 26 guards. 26 guards. Xiahou Yan suddenly remembered something, his face turning pale in an instant. "I remember we only have over 30 guards in total, don't we?" The little maid's eyes were a bit damp. "Yes, yes. Lord Elliot, we only have 7 combat-capable guards left now. Those sacrificial guards, he and they are all brave warriors. Without them, we would not have been able to withstand the attack of the corpse tide and hold out until we set up camp." Xiahou Yan fell silent. With the only knowledge in his memory, he calculated the possibility of crossing the zombie-infested undead infection zone with only 7 guards and escort teams. The answer is 0. So, he struggled to summarize the current situation. Our team of 500 people is now trapped in the center of the infected area, surrounded by countless zombies and unable to leave. Yes. The little maid's voice was as soft as a mosquito and a crying voice. Master Laurie said, "If it's really not possible, I'll leave the people behind tomorrow and send you out of the infected area alone. With 7 guards and the master himself, we should still be able to protect you." Xiahou Yan was stunned for a moment, lost his composure, and asked. "Take me out alone?" "So. What will you do?" "Me, I." Tears streamed down in Jie's cheeks, and Jie didn't want to drag you down. Xiahou Yan felt something choking up in his throat. He took a deep breath and tentatively called out the name of the little maid. "Anjie." The little maid Anjie wiped her tears with the back of her hand and let out a hum. Xiahou Yan closed his eyes and gritted his teeth, saying, "Go tell Master Laurie that I can't go on my own. Leave the people behind and run away. What's the use of me as a lord?" "But Lord Elliot." Anjie shook her head desperately, "We definitely can't survive. Even Captain Alice." "Alice." Xiahou Yan felt a bit impressed by this name. "Isn't she our captain of the guards?" "Yes." Anjie shook her head mournfully. "At that time, the corpse tide was about to catch up with your carriage. Captain Alice rushed up to protect you." Xiahou Yan pursed his lips. In Elliot's memory, Alice was the captain of the Igor family's guards and a master swordsman. But even with her exceptional martial arts skills, she undoubtedly risked her life by rushing into a tide of countless zombies. Master Laurie has done his best, but only managed to retrieve Captain Alice's body. Anjie wiped away her tears and forced a smile as she spoke softly, "Lord Elliot, the tide of corpses is so terrifying. As long as we can safely send you out, we will be very happy. Anyway, I can't run away alone." Xiahou Yan waved his hand irritably. "Let me be quiet. We'll talk about tomorrow's matters tomorrow." Anjie hesitated to speak, but in the end, she bowed and turned around and walked out of the tent. Both she and Xiahou Yan knew that this young lord was just procrastinating and deceiving himself. In the infected area and in front of the tide of corpses, there is always only a choice between life and death. Xiahou Yan waited for Anjie's footsteps to disappear outside the tent before turning his head and looking at the lion-shaped oil lamp by the bed. The yellow metallic surface reflects an overly youthful face. Pale, thin, and gloomy against the backdrop of black hair. Until half a month ago, this young man named Elliot Igor was still a pampered aristocratic young master, striving to pursue a degree in magic at the Imperial Mage Academy, and now, he has become a genuine aristocratic lord, deeply trapped in the infected area with his own people. The lives and deaths of 500 people are in his hands. Elliot Igor. Xiahou Yan murmured his new name, gradually awakening the memories of his original owner and flooding his heart. Childhood family time, the age of a wandering soldier in the Wizarding Academy, and the once heroic and charming face of the captain of the guards, Alice. Xiahou Yan shifted his gaze away from the oil lamp. He reached out his hand and slowly and hesitantly dug out an oilcloth package from the luggage by the bed. It was brought back by Elliot from the school when he dropped out of the Wizarding Academy and came to inherit his family business. Others thought that this package contained textbooks from the Mage Academy, but if his newly revived memory is not wrong, then there should be something else inside. Xiahou Yan took a deep breath and opened the package. The first thing that appeared in sight was a dark diary. He hesitated for a moment, then put aside his diary and revealed several tattered old books below. Introduction to Curse Art, Demonology, Ancient Ritual illustrated books. On the cover of each book, there is a blood-red, forbidden book seal from the Mage Academy. He pulled out the bottom old book from the package and stared at the cover for a while before raising his voice and shouting. Anjia. The voice of the maid quickly came from outside the tent. Lord Elliot, what's wrong? Xiahou Yan suppressed his inner trembling and loudly asked. Where is Captain Alice's body now? End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Dialogue between living and dead people. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Dialogue between living and dead people. Xiahou Yan, led by the maiden Jia, walked into a small tent on the edge of the campsite. There, he found the body of Alice Comstock, the captain of the Igor family's guards. The female swordsman lay upright on a sheepskin felt. This 20.1-year-old female warrior who died was still wrapped in blood-stained chain armor on her upper body, and the hem of her lower skirt was already broken, revealing a pair of high-heeled boots covered in mud. Anjia held a lion oil lamp in her hand and looked at the young lord beside her. Lord Elliot. Give me the lamp. Xiahou Yan gazed at the body of the female swordsman, sniffing the bloody smell at the tip of his nose, and whispered, Let me stay alone with Captain Alice for a while. Anjia seemed to want to say something, but ultimately gave up. She handed the oil lamp to the owner, bowed, and then turned around 3 times before leaving the tent. Soon, there were only 2 people left in the tent. A living person standing, a dead person lying down. The living noble lord and his deceased captain of the guards. In Xiahou Yan's hand, the flame of the oil lamp shone with a golden light, illuminating both his and her faces. Xiahou Yan steadily held the oil lamp and slowly approached Alice Comstock's body, then squatted down beside her, quietly examining the face of the female swordsman. Even though the power of life had completely dissipated from her body, Alice Comstock's face was still moving. Xiahou Yan saw that the long hair of the female swordsman was still tied up in a bun as usual, but it had a faint brown color due to the immersion of blood, instead of the brilliant golden yellow that used to be overflowing with radiance. Xiahou Yan slowly moved his gaze and saw the female swordsman's curved eyebrows, tightly closed eyes, straight nose bridges, and thin lips, like a soft sword. Alice Comstock's skin used to be very white, but now, perhaps due to excessive blood loss, or perhaps simply because of the arrival of death, Alice's cheeks, illuminated by the candlestick light, appear pure white, reminding Xiahou Yan of the new snow in winter in her hometown on Earth. Then, Xiahou Yan saw the fatal wound that caused the death of the female swordsman. In the center of her neck, there was a long and deep wound that had completely turned dark after blood clotted. The uneven edges of the wound are enough to indicate that the damage was not caused by weapons, but rather by the zombie's claw strike. Xiahou Yan no longer looks down. He placed an oil lamp next to Alice's head, so the light could only illuminate half of her cheeks, while the other half fell into darkness. Xiahou Yan bent down and sat cross-legged next to the body of the female swordsman, without any concern for the dirt on the ground. He stared at Alice's face for a while, then remained silent for a long time before saying. First meeting, Captain Alice Comstock. The body of the female swordsman was naturally unable to answer, except for the flickering light of the lion oil lamp. Xiahou Yan was not expecting a response at all. He paused for a moment and whispered to himself. My name is Xiahou Yan, Xiahou Dun Xiahou, Yan of the descendants of the Yellow Emperor. Of course, Captain Alice, you certainly don't know what these mean. In your opinion, I am still your lord, the head of the Igor family, and the former Duke of the Empire, Elliot Igor. He raised his head slightly and looked at the darkness inside the tent, saying with regret. Actually, Alice, maybe even myself is a bit confused. Why did I cross into this world? Will I have to survive in this completely unfamiliar identity and in this unfamiliar world in the future? Xiahou Yan was lost in thought as he looked at the darkness for a moment, then lowered his head to look at Alice's tightly closed eyes and smiled apologetically. Sorry, these philosophical propositions about life and time travel are left to the authors of time travel literature on Earth to worry about. Since I have come to this world now, I will accept my new identity. The female swordsman remained motionless, but Xiahou Yan's heart seemed to have crossed a hurdle. So, I am the head of the Igor family, the lord of the imperial fiefdom, and also you, Miss Alice Comstock, who swore lifelong loyalty. He gazed at the deceased female swordswoman and whispered, a few hours ago, you sacrificed your life to protect me. I express my sincere gratitude to you. He nodded slightly to the female swordsman as a salute, and then continued. Dear Alice, I know you are a loyal captain of the guards. You have always valued my life the most during your lifetime, and I am aware that if you had not unfortunately died, you would have agreed to Master Laurie's proposal, just like my maid Angia. To abandon all my subjects and escape the infected area alone under the protection of the guards. Xiahou Yan picked up a branch from the side, carefully picked up the wick of the oil lamp, and slowly shook his head, saying. But I have to reject this proposal. The education I have received in this world tells me that nobles should take responsibility for their lords. The education I have received on earth tells me that rights and obligations are equal, and since I enjoy the title and benefits of a lord, I also bear the obligation to rescue my lords in times of crisis. Alice's face flickered in the flickering firelight, unsure of how the female swordsman under the 9 springs felt about the lord's speech. Besides, I have a bit of selfishness, Xiahou Yan said with a self-deprecating smile. Since I have traveled from Earth to another world, at least I am treated like a male protagonist in a time-traveling drama. Just running away on my own is not in line with the story direction of royal passion. He laughed heartily after telling this cold joke, then threw down a branch and stood up, looking down at Alice with a solemn expression. But Captain Alice, I believe you also understand how cruel the reality is. Now, our convoy has more than 500 people, the vast majority of whom are elderly, weak, women and children, and farmers who have not received combat training, and to protect everyone from this 100-mile, zombie-infected area, relying solely on 7 guards and Master Laurie is far from enough. He paused for a moment, and a look of sadness and apology surged onto his face. So, Miss Alice, please forgive me, but I have never needed strength so much. To protect others and also to protect myself. He slowly reached into his arms and pulled out a tattered old book. On the dirty book cover, as prominent as the blood-red, forbidden book mark, is the black title of this book. The Essence of Dead Spirit Spells. Xiahou Yan tightly grasped the book in his hand, his hands trembling. He lowered his head and silently gazed at Alice Comstock's face. A beautiful face completely concealed by the aura of heroism. The female swordsman, who was forever asleep, seemed still ready to rise up with her sword and rush to the battlefield. So, Miss Alice Comstock, your lord still needs your service. As a reward, I will give you trust, justice, and honor. Xiahou Yan bit his lips hard, then tasted the sweetness of blood. If I did something wrong, I'm sorry. He opened the book, found the chapter of resurrection, and took a deep breath. First time meeting, Captain Alice Comstock, Xiahou Yen said softly. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. To Alice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. To Alice. In Alice Comstock's memory, the sun of Eagle's Breath Castle was always so bright. Eagle's Breath Castle is the capital of the Duchy of Igor. Every afternoon, when the sun is at its best, the sea breeze blows from the salt sea to the west, so the air of Eagle's Breath Castle is filled with a salty smell. At this point, 10-year-old Alice will stick out her tongue and lick her lips. Salty, just like the taste of dried pickled meat made by the Lord's wife. Dried pickled meat. Alice murmured in her heart, then clenched the handle of the ebony short sword with her two little hands and swung it straight down with a whoosh sound. The sword tip hit the ground of the Eagle Breath Fort training ground, splashing a burst of dust and dust. The Duchy of Igor is located by the Sea of Salt, so it has always been without a shortage of salt. This has resulted in almost every household here having a tradition of marinating and salting dried meat. Similarly, every household knows that only the esteemed Duchess of Igor can make the best preserved meat jerky in the entire Igor Duchy. The Duchess, this noble lady from the Eastern Empire, has been married to the Igor family for a full 20 years. For the past 20 years, she would personally pickle a bundle of dried salted meat every year, and then cut it into small pieces on New Year's Eve with a silver knife only found in the Imperial Palace, and distribute it as a reward to the soldiers stationed in Yingzabo. It is said that a soldier once left his own piece of pickled meat untouched and turned around to sell it for 3 silver coins at a high price on the black market of the Duchess. Who wouldn't want to taste the pickled meat jerky handmade by the beautiful Duchess of the entire territory? Eagle's Breath Fort Garrison. Alice thought of the term and swung her sword again, making a huge cut on the scarecrow beside her. If I could join the garrison, I would be able to eat the Duchess's dried pickled meat every year. Alice has only tasted the Duchess's pickled jerky once, a year ago on New Year's Eve when she was 9 years old. As the deputy captain of the Eagle's Breath Castle Guard, his father was on duty guarding the castle that day, so he made an exception and brought Alice, who was left unattended, into the castle. When the guards were having New Year's dinner together, the beautiful Duchess noticed the little girl hiding in the corner, so she personally cut an extra piece of pickled meat and asked the child to pass it to Alice. At that time, Alice was completely stunned by the grandeur of the castle and the beauty of the Duchess. She did not bow to the Duchess as her father had taught her, but stood there dumbfounded, letting the little black-haired boy push a piece of dried pickled meat into her hand. Afterwards, little Alice had completely forgotten how she was taken home by her father, but she remembered the taste of the dried pickled meat very well. On the second day of the new year, she asked her father how she could become a soldier of Eagle's Breath Castle like him. "Just practice more swordsmanship," my father replied perfunctorily, busy drinking. "So, just practice swordsmanship." Alice thought so and flew a sword again in the afternoon sea breeze of Eagle's Breath Castle, completely cutting off the scarecrow's head. The laughter of soldiers could be heard in the distance. It seemed like someone had lost some bet. Alice Comstock didn't care. A small blonde girl, waving her wooden sword hard in the martial arts training ground, behind her, the majestic Eagle Breath Castle shines brightly under the sunshine of the Western Empire. "Alice Comstock, welcome to the Duke of Igor's Guard," said the father dryly, with no hint of joy on his face. In the rest room of the Eagle's Breath Castle Guards, 17-year-old Alice Comstock, dressed in standard leather armor, wielded her sword and loudly replied. "Yes, Captain Comstock." My father, who was almost 50 years old, dusted off his captain's armband and his expression became even more helpless. "If your mother knew I allowed you to do this, she would definitely kill me," he muttered. "Report to the captain, I will work hard." Alice straightened her chest again and her voice grew louder. Father rolled his eyes. "According to tradition, our guards don't hire women, but you're lucky, the Duchess needs a personal guard recently." Duchess. Alice felt a suffocating joy surge in her heart, that beautiful Duchess. "Alice, I warn you that the rules of Eagle's Breath Castle are very strict. Father took out the wine jug from his waist, gulped it down, and pouted, from today on, you will be the lady's exclusive guard. You must obey the Duchess unconditionally and not disobey her orders. Remember, you are only 17 years old and a girl. If you make any mistakes, I, as a father, will be unlucky. Yes. Alice answered loudly. There was a commotion coming from not far away. Alice and her father turned their heads and saw a handsome young man with black hair walking past the door surrounded by everyone before disappearing. Alice felt that the boy looked a bit familiar. That's the Duke's youngest son, named Elliot. His father took another sip of wine. He's a child with a talent for magic. He has been studying at the Mage Academy in the school city, and this time he's coming back from vacation. It seems like he has to leave after 2 days. The rules of the old men at the Mage Academy are very rigid. Alice let out an "oh" and didn't take her father's words to heart. The little girl's heart was completely filled with the joy of being able to accompany the Duchess. "Hello," her father called out to her. "What's wrong?" Alice looked at her father in confusion. Father gripped the wine jug, licked his lips, and for a long time whispered. "You performed well in the swordsmanship competition. Your mother will be proud of you." 21-year-old Alice Comstock, dressed in gorgeous armor adorned with tassels, stood in place leaning on a sword hilt. In the brilliant sunshine of Eagle's Breath Castle, she felt waves of dizziness. Not far away, the imperial envoy wearing a lion-patterned silk robe, surrounded by a group of regular imperial troops, loudly read out the emperor's decree on the sheepskin scroll. It is now found that Duke Vincent Igor conspired to rebel, and his crime is unforgivable. He has been beheaded in the imperial capital. Former Duchess Anna Igor is suspected of being an accomplice and is allowed to be arrested. We are waiting for the imperial authorities to interrogate her. The beautiful Duchess Anna Igor knelt in front of the imperial envoy, her crimson-purple dress stained with tears. Alice gritted her teeth as she saw the lady tugging at the leg of the despicable imperial envoy's pants, pleading and asking. "Adults, adults. What about Elliot? What about my Elliot?" The imperial envoy gave her a contemptuous glance, then stretched out his leg and kicked the Duchess to the ground with his exquisite cowhide boots. At that moment, Alice almost wanted to draw her long sword and cut off this bastard for her wife. His Majesty the Emperor issued an order. The imperial envoy clearly did not notice Alice's hateful gaze. He arrogantly raised the scroll and loudly declared, "Vincent Igor's son, Elliot Igor, is in the school city and did not participate in the rebellion. His Majesty the Emperor ordered him to inherit all his father's titles and territories." Upon hearing that her son was safe and sound, Duchess Anna Igor's pale face suddenly regained its color. She no longer cried or begged, but silently let the imperial soldiers take her to the prisoner's carriage. Before getting into the car, she gave Alice an apologetic and gentle smile from a distance. The imperial envoy and battalion of imperial soldiers escorted the prisoner's carriage and left Eagle's Breath Castle with great pride. Alice Comstock, the captain of the Eagle's Breath Castle guards, released the hilt of her sword, tightly grasped it, and turned her head to look north. That is the direction of the school city and the Mage Academy. "Sister Alice, on Lord Elliot's side." Angia cried out heart-wrenching. Alice chopped down a zombie with great force, followed Angia's instructions, and then saw the carriage of Lord Elliot Igor and the rolling tide of corpses following closely behind. Master Laurie trembling on the top of the carriage, his hands sparkling, as if preparing some magic against the zombies, but time was too late. Alice didn't hesitate, turned around, exerted her strength, and rushed towards the tide of corpses under the astonished gaze of Master Laurie. For the first time in her life, Alice closed her eyes in battle. She recalled the appearance of the Duchess, feeling a salty taste surge in her mouth. Was it the smell of blood, the taste of the lady's dried pickled meat, or the sea breeze of Eagle's Breath Castle that always carried a salty taste? Alice Comstock did not get the answer. In the darkness, a voice said. That kid wants to resurrect you. That kid. Alice Comstock was a bit confused. Who? Who else can it be? The voice seemed a bit unpleasant, your respected lord. Lord. Alice Comstock first thought of the former Lord Vincent Igor, but soon after, a child with dark hair named Elliot appeared in her mind. Okay. The female swordsman felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she still smiled happily. Then take me back. In the radiance of resurrection, Alice Comstock once again saw the young nobleman with black hair all over his head. She lay on the sheepskin felt where the corpse was parked, staring blankly at her lord, and suddenly couldn't help but chuckle softly. Lord Elliot, I want to eat dried pickled meat. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. From the Underworld. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 From the Underworld. Now, Xiahou Yan is completely confused. This is not surprising as the effect of resurrection is not surprising. When Elliot Igor, a noble young master, studied at a wizarding academy, he was known for being idle and neglecting his profession. He almost failed all the exams in formal magic classes, but Elliot was particularly curious about those forbidden magic. For example, necromancy, curses, demon summoning rituals. That's probably why before leaving the school city, Elliot even casually took a large package of forbidden books with him. When he was in the school city, Elliot had actually tried the resurrection spell in the undead spell once. Not against humans, but against a dead cockroach. The casting of the resurrection spell was very successful, and a cockroach that had died for 2 days was resurrected into one in the full radiance of the room. Zombie cockroaches. Yes, death cannot be reversed. According to existing magic theories, true resurrection does not exist. The so-called resurrection in necromancy is simply to resurrect people into zombies controlled by the caster. This is also the purpose of Xiahou Yan. Since the combat ability of zombies is linked to their strength during their lifetime, then after being cast the resurrection spell, the master swordsman Alice must be able to become a powerful zombie, thus supplementing the combat power that the fleet currently needs most, right? Turning a deceased person into a zombie is undoubtedly a decision that goes against ethics and morality, but it is the only way out in the current situation. However, after Xiahou Yan made such a great decision and recited the spell of resurrection to Alice, he found is there something wrong with the situation. According to the essence of necromanticism, the symbol for the resurrection spell to take effect is the appearance of a phantom of the god of death above the target corpse. According to Elliot's memory, when resurrecting the dead cockroach, a black figure wearing a hood and holding a sickle could indeed be seen briefly appearing in the air. But this time, after reciting the resurrection spell, a completely different yet incredibly familiar figure appeared above Alice's body, long robes with wide sleeves, beautiful beards and black beards, pearl curtains and noble robes. Is this really the Yan Prince? Xiahou Yan was stunned as he watched the plump black-robed official reappear and disappear, then lowered his head and stared blankly at the wound on Alice Comstock's throat, as if it had been sewn together by invisible needles and thread, healing at lightning speed as before. Then, the long eyelashes of the female swordsman trembled for a moment, and then 2 tears rolled down the corners of her eyes. Xiahou Yan's mind was blank as he reached out his hand, trying to wipe away those 2 tears, but he saw Alice slowly open her eyes. That's a pair of eyes as blue as the sea. Xiahou Yan's hands froze in the air and dared not move. Then he heard the sound of mosquitoes and gnats. Lord Elliot, I want to eat dried pickled meat. Xiahou Yan felt his brain explode with a bang. What kind of pickled meat jerky is it? And can zombies also speak? Xiahou Yan stumbled back 2 steps, even dropping the book Essentials of Necromancies to the ground. He stared blankly at Alice Comstock struggling to sit up from the woolen felt, then looked over with her big blue eyes. That. Xiahou Yan opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. Elliot. Lord. Alice Comstock asked softly, feeling a bit confused. At first, her voice seemed a bit hoarse, but soon returned to normal. Where is this? Has the tide of corpses receded? This is the campsite of the convoy. Xiahou Yan looked at the overly vibrant zombie, and reluctantly replied, the zombie tide has been temporarily abandoned by us. Alice. You. How do you feel? Alice wanted to answer the Lord's question, but felt a bit confused, so she covered her forehead with her hand. I remember. I should have died in the tide of corpses. Then, in the darkness, there seemed to be a voice saying, my Lord wants to resurrect me, and then I woke up. Resurrection. Alice Comstock recited the word again in her heart and then suddenly realized it. Lord Elliot. Alice looked at Xiahou Yan in surprise, did you resurrect me? She vaguely remembered that her lord seemed to be indeed a magician. By the way, can wizards still resurrect the dead? The female swordsman with a severe lack of magical knowledge is a bit confused. Indeed, I revived you. Xiahou Yan replied with difficulty, feeling a fever on his face. I'm sorry, I couldn't ask for your opinion, but we really need you now, so I tried using a resurrection technique. Alice paused for a moment, then smiled and lowered her head to Xiahou Yan, saying, Lord Elliot, thank you. Captain Alice Comstock of the Eagle's Breath Guard is willing to continue serving you. Also serving my wife. The female swordsman silently spoke in her heart, feeling a surge of warmth surging in her chest. Xiahou Yan finally breathed a sigh of relief. He focused his attention and carefully examined Alice's appearance. The wound on the female swordsman's throat has been completely repaired by the resurrection technique. In the middle of the broken collar, pure white skin is exposed, as if there has never been a fatal wound there before. Alice supported the ground with her hands and sat diagonally on the sheepskin felt, her chest heaving slightly with her breath. Except for a slight weakness, this female swordsman seemed to be no different from an ordinary person. However, her face remained as pure white as snow, as if devoid of any blood color. Please forgive me, Xiahou Yan hesitated for a moment before approaching Alice and reaching out his hand to her face. When his fingertips touched Alice's face, the female swordsman trembled but did not resist. So Xiahou Yan pressed his hand against Alice's cheek, and immediately felt a piercing cold in his palm. Undoubtedly, this is not the body temperature that a living person should have. Big or big? Alice looked up at her lord, suppressing her inner shame and trembling body. Xiahou Yan pondered for a moment, then put down his hand and said in a deep voice. Captain Alice, do you have a heartbeat now? Alice paused for a moment, then extended her right index and middle fingers, gently resting them on her left wrist. There is no pulse. The female swordsman raised her head in a daze and looked at Xiahou Yan. Xiahou Yan extended his hand again and pressed it against the female swordsman's neck. Again, he couldn't feel the pulsation of the arteries. Out of courtesy, he didn't try to test Alice's heartbeat again, but he knew what the result was. Ah, Lord Elliot. Alice trembled all over and asked in panic, what does this mean? Xiahou Yan felt a tangled mess in his mind. He carefully considered the words and phrases, slowly crouched down, and looked straight into Alice's blue eyes, saying, Captain Alice, there is no true resurrection in the world. What I cast on you is the resurrection spell in the undead spell, which theoretically should have turned you into a zombie that is unconscious and completely obedient to my commands. However, as you can see, the effect of the spell now seems special. Okay. You still retain your memories, thoughts, and emotions from your lifetime, but... Xiahou Yan licked his lips and struggled to come to the conclusion. But it seems that you can't be considered a living person now. Alice lowered her head and chewed on the Lord's words carefully. Just when Xiahou Yan thought that this girl, who was only 20.1 years old and suddenly lost her body temperature and heartbeat, would cry or be hysterical, she lifted her head and showed a brilliant smile again. Lord Elliot, do you know what I swore allegiance to your father when I joined the Eagle's Breath Guard? What is it? Xiahou Yan asked. Alice Comstock recalled the scene at that time, and the beautiful figure of Duchess Anna Igor appeared in her mind. She looked straight at her current lord and recited with a smile. Alice Comstock hereby vows to offer my loyalty to the Igor family. To live and die. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Worries of Old Laurie. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Worries of Old Laurie. To the surprise of Xiahou Yan, Alice Comstock quickly accepted the fact that she had been resurrected. Even the female swordsman expressed that it was her lifelong honor to be able to return to life and continue to serve the Igor family. But these did not reduce Xiahou Yan's inner unease. Forcibly bringing a dead person back to this world, whether according to the values on Earth or in this world, is an disgraceful and unethical behavior. That's why necromancy is considered taboo by the wizarding associations of this world. According to imperial law, wizards who are found to use necromancy must be tied to pillars and burned alive. Of course, Xiahou Yan didn't have the time to deal with these legal issues. You know, if you can't get out of this zombie-infested area, being tied to a pillar and burned to death is no different from being bitten by zombies. What he is more concerned about is Alice's current physical condition. Alice, how are you feeling now? Xiahou Yan looked at the resurrected female captain of the guards. Lord Elliot, I feel strange now. Alice pursed her lips and tried to turn her wrist. I can't feel my heart rate or temperature, but my body moves freely, even easier than before. Actually, I feel pretty good. She looked around and casually picked up a wooden stick from the corner of the tent, made a sword gesture, and then with a loud "ha," she used the stick as a long sword and stabbed it out. The smooth movements and heroic demeanor, in Xiahou Yan's eyes, have nothing to do with the word zombie. Strange. Alice withdrew the wooden stick and inserted it into her belt like a short sword, pondering. Lord Elliot, I feel like my movements are even stronger than before. Xiahou Yan frowned. According to the essence of necromanticism, resurrected zombies do indeed have an increase in strength compared to before. So, what kind of existence is Alice Comstock now? Living people. Dead people. Zombie, a living dead person. However, the result is good. Xiahou Yan can only comfort himself. For the migration convoy deeply trapped in the infected area, it is a good thing that the peak of the force value in the team can be resurrected from death. Seeing Xiahou Yan clenching her chin in thought, Alice hesitated for a moment and walked towards him. Lord Elliot. Captain Alice. Xiahou Yan looked up at the female swordsman who had been revived by himself, feeling a little guilty and a little guilty. You don't have to worry about me, Alice smiled. I've already told you that for me, as long as I can continue to use my sword to protect you, it's enough. As for whether I'm dead or alive, whether I have a heartbeat or body temperature, it doesn't matter. The female swordsman has a tall and slender figure, about the same height as Elliot Igor. Xiahou Yan looked straight into Alice's eyes and gritted his teeth. Alice, believe me, he said in a deep voice. I swear in the honor of my nobility that if we can escape from the infected area, I will do everything possible to return your heartbeat and body temperature to you, so that you truly come back to life. Alice shook her head and looked gently at Xiahou Yan. The gaze clearly said, you don't need to do so much for me. It seems that even in her current half-dead state and continuing to serve the Lord forever, the female swordsman has no complaints. But Xiahou Yan still shook his head. Miss Alice, I just said a sentence to your body. As a lord, I am responsible for my people. He bent down and picked up the lion lantern from the ground, then looked straight into Alice's eyes and said seriously. And you, Alice Comstock, you are also my lord. Alice chuckled with a puff. She tilted her head and suddenly her eyes lit up, curious and saying. Lord Elliot, regarding the effect of your resurrection spell and my current state. Why don't you consult Master Laurie? After all, he is the only legitimate wizard in our team. Xiahou Yan felt that the word genuine in Alice's words was a bit harsh. As is well known, Elliot Igor was unable to graduate from the Wizarding Academy because he had to rush back to inherit his family business, and he may not be able to obtain an official wizard's license in his lifetime, Master Laurie. Xiahou Yan drove away these distractions and hesitated, is this appropriate? Aren't there wizards very averse to these forbidden spells, necromancy spells, and so on? Alice blinked cunningly and said, do you know why Master Laurie came to Eagle's Breath Castle as the chief mage back then? Why? Xiahou Yan felt like he had already guessed the answer. I heard from your mother. Master Laurie was driven out of the school city by the Wizarding Society because he practiced forbidden magic. Alice replied, at that time, he had no way out and no one took him in. That's why he was hired for life by the kind Lord Vincent, your father, with a monthly salary of 1 gold coin, and became the chief wizard of the Igor family from then on. Xiahou Yan is speechless. A chief mage who practices forbidden magic, young son who loves necromancy. Does the Igor family have a lineage that attracts forbidden magic? Then let's go ask Master Laurie. Xiahou Yan thought for a moment and agreed to Alice's suggestion. Let's see what the professionals say. Victor Laurie, the chief mage of the Igor family, who is nearly 80 years old, has been in a bad mood lately. This is actually quite normal, trapped in the center of the infected area with 500 people and surrounded by countless zombies, no one can be happy. But the reason why Master Laurie is troubled is destined to be different from others. Near the center of the campsite, several tenant farmers were sitting around the campfire, grilling apples and discussing the thrilling incident of encountering a wave of corpses today. Suddenly, they heard a clanging sound behind them. When the tenant farmers looked back, they found that Master Laurie was pouting his butt, poking his head in the middle of a pile of cargo boxes, like a malnourished and excessively thin old ostrich. Master Laurie, shouted a tenant farmer, what are you doing? I'm looking for something. Master Laurie pulled his head out of the pile of goods, his long and sparse white beard trembling with anxiety. My thing is lost. It was originally hidden in a box. The only remaining cargo boxes are here, the tenant shrugged. At that time, there was a rush of corpses, and we lost a lot of goods. If we don't have them here, we'll just throw them in the tide and can't find them back. Master Laurie's old face instantly turned pale. No, Master Laurie. Another tenant farmer suddenly noticed something suspicious. Why are your personal belongings hidden in the cargo box of our territory? I have something else to do, let's talk later. Master Laurie said to him, picking up his dirty old robe and about to run away. He turned around, but unfortunately ran into an unexpected character. Master Laurie, I've been looking for you for a long time. Xiahou Yan hugged his arm and stared at his chief mage. Why are you running to the campfire instead of staying in your tent? Master Laurie rolled his eyes, but before he could come up with a suitable answer, the tenant farmer behind him loudly reported. Lord, Master Laurie is looking for something. Xiahou Yan scrutinized Master Laurie with suspicion. Master, here are all the materials we need to build our new territory. What are you looking for here? Master Laurie squeezed his wrinkled old face and was about to cry. Find the book I lost. What book? Xiahou Yan asked. Novels. Novels. Xiahou Yan confirmed, are you looking for novels in the goods in your territory? It was the one I hid in the box before. Master Laurie twisted his head for a long time before lowering his head deeply. That. Erotic novel. The 4 words, erotic novels, were like a thunderbolt, completely shattering Xiahou Yan's stupidity. It took him a long time to feel as if something had shattered in his heart. Consult this old pervert about necromancy magic, is this really a good idea? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Magic Consultation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Magic Consultation. Elliot Igor, the head of the Igor family and former Lord of Eagle's Breath, and Victor Laurie, the chief mage of the Igor family, climbed a small hill next to the campsite and looked out from afar side by side. It's already midnight, with clear stars and moon. Tents that were temporarily set up were like spreading and growing white mushrooms, patched up on the grass. Among these tents, wooden trucks are parked one after another, and there are also campfires lit in some places. Those members of the convoy who can't sleep sit around the campfire chatting, probably still looking back on the experience of encountering a wave of corpses during the day. Xiahou Yan squinted his eyes and counted. Although the exact number cannot be specified, the number of carriages in the convoy is significantly less than when they departed from Eagle's Breath Castle. Which means that even if they can escape the infected area, a considerable portion of the materials used to establish new territories in the future have been lost in the corpse tide. He tried his best to restrain his worries about the future and looked further away. At the end of the campsite, he saw a dark pine forest. Under the night, birds occasionally startle and fly in the pine forest, making the entire scene appear gloomy and desolate. That's the only forest in this infected area without a name. Master Laurie noticed the Lord's gaze and introduced himself like an overly attentive tour guide. Zombies detest the vitality of plants, so they dare not approach the vicinity of the forest. That's why we chose to camp by the edge of the forest. Zombies afraid of plants. Somehow, Xiahou Yan felt a bit familiar with this setting. However, he also understood in his heart that although the campsite looked peaceful and tranquil at present, as long as he left this forest and walked a few miles towards the outskirts of the infected area, he would immediately encounter a large group of hungry zombies. This temporary camp, like the eye of a hurricane, maintains rare safety in a dangerous infection zone. Master Laurie, he looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the night sky and spoke leisurely, I have a serious question to ask you now. Lord, just say it. Master Laurie nodded in fear. You. Xiahou Yan took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. Why do you have to look for Huang Shu to read in the middle of the night? Master Laurie was like a rooster choked by his neck, staring and hesitating for a while before finally holding back a sentence. That's not a yellow book, it's an erotic novel. Xiahou Yan sneered, is there a difference? Master Laurie opened his mouth and finally lowered his head regretfully, the long night is long, and it's inevitable to feel lonely. Our convoy just hit a wave of corpses today. Xiahou Yan roared softly, we have lost more than 20 guards, countless leaders, and supplies. We are still trapped in the center of the infected area and can't get out, while you're still sleeping and looking for Huang Shu to read. Master Laurie twisted his hands like a child who had done something wrong, showing a teasing smile. Anyway. Xiahou Yan took a few deep breaths and suppressed his desire to slap the mentally disabled old man to death. He sneered and asked. I'm here to ask you about something important about magic. Know everything without hesitation. Master Laurie, as if granted amnesty, slapped his bony chest. Xiahou Yan considered the wording and tentatively asked. Do you understand forbidden magic? Lord. Master Laurie waved his hand in panic as soon as he heard the word forbidden magic. Me. I haven't done these things for decades. Don't misunderstand me. I'm innocent. Xiahou Yan was puzzled. I didn't say anything, what's wrong with your old man's appearance of being a thief and feeling guilty? Don't say those useless things, I'll ask you a question, he glared angrily at his chief wizard, interrupting his self-defense. As a wizard, how much do you know about forbidden magic? Master Laurie looked around stealthily before answering in a low voice. That, slightly understood. Do you know the resurrection technique in necromancy? Xiahou Yan held his arm and glanced sideways at the old man beside him. Upon hearing this word, Master Laurie foolishly dug out his ear before squinting his eyes to confirm. Resurrection Technique. The third-ranked resurrection technique among the 10 forbidden curses recognized by the Magic Association. Xiahou Yan instinctively felt that the term 10 forbidden curses sounded a bit dangerous, but he still had to nod and admit. The resurrection technique that can turn corpses into zombies. Is that what you're talking about? As a result, Master Laurie quickly reached out his hand, barefaced, and covered the Lord's mouth with a snap, whispering quickly. Lord Elliot. You can't talk nonsense about forbidden spells. Not only is casting such spells a heinous crime, but according to the regulations of the Wizardry Association, as wizards, even verbal discussions on this topic are prohibited. Xiahou Yan shook off Master Laurie's hand and angrily said. I haven't graduated and obtained a magic license, and the association's regulations can't regulate me. Master Laurie looked at the Lord humbly and understood the meaning behind his words. Lord, although you haven't graduated from the Mage Academy, I, Victor Laurie, am a legitimate wizard with a legitimate roots and under the jurisdiction of the association. You're talking nonsense yourself. Can you please don't pull me in, Master Laurie? I just want to confirm one thing. Xiahou Yan tugged at Master Laurie's sleeve and whispered in his ear, is it possible for zombies resurrected by resurrection to retain their memories, thoughts, or emotions during their lifetime? Ha! Master Laurie glanced at his lord like he was looking at a mentally disabled person. You've already said that you were resurrected by resurrection, but zombies. Oh. Zombies. Do you know what zombies are? Xiahou Yan really wants to answer. Zombies are not the kind of creatures that can invade other people's gardens and eat their brains, but he remained silent with the professional qualities that a traveler should possess. Zombies. Yes. No. My own. Thinking. Master Laurie emphasized word by word, have you seen those zombies in today's zombie tide? In theory, zombies resurrected by resurrection should be no different from those brainless monsters except for obeying the speller. Xiahou Yan savored the master's speech and then asked. So. How do you explain this phenomenon? What phenomenon? Master Laurie wanted to ask this question, but Xiahou Yan had already raised his hand and extended his finger not far away. The master followed the instructions of the Lord and saw the second unexpected character tonight. Good evening, Master Laurie. Alice Comstock stood gracefully on the hillside, smiling and bowing to the master. Master Laurie opened his mouth wide and stared at the female swordsman in front of him, his eyes round like goldfish. The master suspected that he had symptoms of dementia in old age. It must have been a memory problem for him, because even today during the day, he saw Alice cut her throat with a paw from a zombie. Even, it was Master Laurie who performed his own ingestion technique to snatch Alice's body back from the tide of corpses. What the hell is going on here? Master Laurie. Xiahou Yan poked the master's back expressionlessly, I just used a resurrection spell on Alice's body, and the spell seems to have some effect. But as you can see, her current state seems to be different from the zombie you described. Master Laurie's throat made a rooster-like gurgling sound, and he turned his head stiffly, staring foolishly at the Lord. Xiahou Yan felt that the old man's current state was much more zombie-like than Alice's. What do you have in mind? He earnestly consulted Master Laurie. Master Laurie was stunned for about half a minute before finally regaining his language ability. The old wizard, who was nearly 80 years old, looked up at the night sky above his head, tears rolling in his eyes. My idea is. If only I hadn't run out to find Huang Shu tonight. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Practice brings true knowledge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Practice brings true knowledge. Master Laurie circled around Alice while constantly marveling at her. The female swordsman stood with a sword, her expression somewhat awkward. On the side, Xiahou Yan held his arms and his face was filled with impatience. So, what are you saying about this? Xiahou Yan asked as Master Laurie stroked his beard and fell into contemplation. Why was Captain Alice resurrected to the way she is now? Master Laurie raised his head and looked seriously at his lord, answering solemnly. I don't know, that's such an old face that deserves to be beaten. Xiahou Yan felt a surge of anger in his heart. But before Lord could react, Master Laurie pinched his chin and looked back at Alice, pondering. Based on my judgment, there seems to be some deviation in your resurrection technique, causing Captain Comstock to be in an intermediate state between living and dead. Look. The old wizard extended his hand like a withered tree branch and gave Alice a crisp snap of his finger. Under the surprised gaze of Xiahou Yan, a grey mist suddenly surged out of Alice's facial features, and then gathered around her cheeks into a suspended mist sphere. The female swordsman, who did not understand magic, was initially afraid, but when she saw that Lord Elliot had not taken any action, she quickly calmed down. This is... Xiahou Yan frowned as he looked at the grey mist balloon. This is the magic that I extracted from her body with a ghostly attribute, Master Laurie said in a deep voice. The so-called necromancy, like any other magic, is a method of manipulating specific attribute magic. And the resurrection technique in necromancy is essentially injecting the ghostly power into the corpse, transforming it into a zombie, driven by magic. The old wizard paused and cautiously continued, saying. Lord Elliot, as you can see, Captain Alice has been without a heartbeat since your resurrection. This is impossible for a living person because we always need the heart to pump out blood and provide nutrients to support the operation of our body. If I guess correctly, now Captain Alice's body is not supported by the power of the heart pumping blood like a living person, but by something else that drives blood, muscles, and various bodily functions. The dark magic. Xiahou Yan guessed the answer. Yes. Master Laurie asserted, currently, the reason why Captain Alice's body can continue to move is because her body has been infused with ghost magic by your resurrection spell. Her every move now consumes not nutrition obtained through eating, but magic. In this regard, her way of survival is no different from that of zombies, and the resurrection spell has still achieved the theoretical effect it should have. Master Laurie finished his conclusion in one breath and immediately frowned again. But what I don't understand is, why can Captain Alice still have emotions, memories, and self-activity abilities like ordinary humans? When a person dies, their soul will completely disappear, and the effect of magic can only manipulate the movement of human corpses at best, but it is impossible to restore a soul with self-awareness. Master Laurie's self-talk made Alice dizzy. The female captain of the guards, who had been practicing swordsmanship all her life, had no knowledge of these magical studies. She looked at her lord like seeking help, only to find that Lord Elliot, like the master, was also lost in thought. The group of bookworm magicians. The female swordsman rolled her eyes and secretly roasted in her heart. And besides that, I also discovered a bigger suspicion. Master Laurie suddenly turned to Xiahou Yan and stared at the lord with a bright and lively gaze. What is it? Xiahou Yan felt guilty for no reason. What was your score on the last magic test when you were in the Mage Academy? The score of the magic test. Xiahou Yan searched for the memories of Elliot Igor and soon recalled a peculiar scene. Elliot Igor stood in the center of a circular hall, surrounded by magicians wearing pointed high hats and long robes. In front of Elliot, there was a blue crystal ball that was half a person tall. The ball was semi-transparent, and its smooth surface reflected countless candlelight in the hall. The inside of the ball was filled with crisscrossing crystal threads. Under the instruction of a white-bearded mage, Elliot placed his palm on the crystal ball, so, the crystal threads inside the crystal ball began to flicker non-stop. When the flicker stops, the vast majority of the crystal threads turn dim, but there are also some crystal threads that steadily appear bright, like strands of silver hair. 1024 Pat. The white-bearded mage counted the number of crystal threads in the crystal ball and announced loudly to everyone, second level. I remember I was a second-level mage. Xiahou Yan snapped out of his memory and answered Master Laurie's question. Look, Master Laurie said calmly, mages are divided into 9 levels, and each level they cross increases the amount of magic in their bodies tenfold. You are now a 2nd level junior mage, and I am a 5th level junior mage. But do you know how high a mage level is required for the 10 forbidden curses represented by resurrection spells? 2nd level. Xiahou Yan thought that since he could use the resurrection spell himself, the requirements of this spell should not be too high, right? It's the 7th level. The advanced mage of the 7th level. Master Laurie angrily compared the number 7 with his fingers. Mages below the 7th level cannot successfully cast the master level magic of resurrection. A certain 2nd level mage opened his mouth and said, but when I was in college before, I successfully resurrected a cockroach. Do you think the difficulty of resurrecting insects is the same as that of resurrecting humans? Master Laurie glanced sideways at the Lord. Xiahou Yan fell into silence. Indeed, according to Elliot Igor's memory, he was mainly idle and bored in studying forbidden magic in school, and did not expect to achieve anything in this area. One important reason is that the use of forbidden magic often requires a great amount of magic support, and Elliot, who has only a 2nd level of magic, clearly cannot meet this requirement. Looking back now, when the cockroach was resurrected, the magic in Elliot's body had already been drained away, and just now, when he used the resurrection spell on Alice, he was completely desperate and rushed to seek medical treatment, without even remembering it. This forbidden spell seems to have a great demand for magical power, so, he poked Master Laurie blankly, how did I, a 2nd level junior mage, resurrect Alice? Master Laurie stared at the Lord with a monster-like gaze, and after a long time, he solemnly replied. I don't know. At that moment, Xiahou Yan really wanted to completely expel this chief mage who asked 3 questions without knowing anything. However, I have already thought of how to delve deeper into this mysterious phenomenon. Master Laurie's tone turned sharply. Xiahou Yan and Alice looked at each other suspiciously. What method? Xiahou Yan asked. I have learned one thing from my long career as a magician. Master Laurie chuckled cunningly, that is, practice leads to true knowledge. Only by witnessing your casting process with my own eyes can I determine what exactly happened when you resurrected Captain Alice. Lord, if I remember correctly. Are there still several corpses of other guards on the campsite? Alice beside her was stunned. You are truly a talent for studying forbidden magic. Xiahou Yan exclaimed sincerely. I understand, I understand. Master Laurie's face turned red. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Life and Death Decision. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Life and Death Decision. The tent where the corpses of the guards are parked is far from the other end of the campsite. Captain Alice went to find a place to change her clothes herself. Until just now, the female swordsman was still wearing the blood-stained military uniform she wore when she died. Obviously, she had endured the bloody aura on herself for too long. So, Xiahou Yan and Master Laurie walked side by side in the camp. The moon is bright and the stars are sparse, the black magpies are flying south, and the cool breeze is blowing gently. If he were still on Earth in his past life, Xiahou Yan would feel that this romantic scene should accompany his women for a moonwalk. But now, walking with him is actually a dry and withered old man with a long robe emitting a foul smell. Lord, your nose feels a bit sore. However, Master Victor Laurie, who was foolish, clearly did not notice the Lord's sadness at all. This old rammed cargo was holding a lantern in his hand, humming a popular violin tune from the imperial capital while scrutinizing the various objects in the camp, which made Xiahou Yan suspect that he was still trying to retrieve his little yellow book. Just as the Lord's frustration was about to reach its peak, Master Laurie suddenly asked. Lord Elliot, have you considered the advice I gave you before? The tone of the Master's sentence is unusually low. Xiahou Yan knows what the Master's advice refers to. He shook his head and said. Master, I know you want me to leave my people behind and escape the infected area alone under your and the guard's protection, but I must reject this proposal. There are still my 500 lords here. What kind of lords would abandon their own people and flee for their own lives? Upon hearing the lord's answer, Master Laurie did not continue to persuade as the latter had imagined, but instead turned the topic in an unexpected direction. Lord Elliot, do you know the history of the infected area under our feet? I don't know, Xiahou Yan answered truthfully. When I was a child in geography class, my tutor once told Elliot Igor that there was a zombie-infested uninfected area in the southern part of the empire, but history textbooks kept the origin of this infected area a secret. Unexpectedly, one day he would personally lead his followers into this infected area. That was over 800 years ago. Master Laurie looked at the distant starry sky with a leisurely gaze. There was a talented necromancer who was stunningly talented, trying to improve the resurrection technique in necromancy to conquer humanity's greatest enemy. Death. Yes, he was trying to do what you did tonight. Resurrect a human who retained his consciousness during his lifetime, rather than a brainless zombie. Xiahou Yan pursed his lips without speaking, but he vaguely realized that he seemed to have done something terrible. Undoubtedly, the necromancer failed. Master Laurie chuckled bitterly. According to legend, he died in his own experiment, and the ghostly magic caused by the necromancer experiment leaked and infected the town he lived in, constantly expanding outward. All creatures touched by this ghostly magic were transformed into highly aggressive, immortal zombies, and the first to bear the brunt were the residents of that town. The two of them happened to walk into an open area in the camp. Master Laurie reached out and pointed to the west. Well, the ruins of that town are located 20 miles to the west. If you go now, you might even find the house where the necromancer lived 800 years ago. As long as you haven't been gnawed into bones by the zombies in the town ruins first. Xiahou Yan fantasized about a scene where a group of zombies hugged a living person and gnawed wildly, feeling a bit hungry for some reason. He misses the scorpion soup on Earth so much. Master Laurie was unaware of Lordship's homesickness and continued to tell the story. At that time, the town was the territory of a noble earl. Overnight, almost all of the earl's lords became walking dead, and he gathered the remaining few hundred surviving townsmen to hide together in the castle. But the zombies kept scratching the castle gate day and night. The castle was captured by the zombies. It was only a matter of time. The zombies besieged the city. Xiahou Yan licked his lips. At that time, almost everyone in the castle was in despair. However, the count thought more than others. He was acutely aware that someone must inform the Wizarding Society of everything happening here before the dark magic continued to spread, otherwise it would not be just the people of this town who suffered. Master Laurie's speech was a bit dry, and Xiahou Yan took off the water bottle from his waist and handed it to the other person. The master thanked him, turned on the kettle and poured it wildly before gasping for breath and continuing. Shortly thereafter, the count made a decision that no one had anticipated. At night, he secretly opened the door and put the zombies into the castle. The hungry zombies quickly devoured all the survivors who had taken refuge in the castle, but the count himself was able to escape the town alone on horseback while the zombies were busy feeding. Seeing Xiahou Yan dumbfounded, Master Laurie said softly. In this way, the count became the only survivor in the town at the cost of hundreds of townspeople. He rode his horse all the way to the school city and reported the leakage of the ghost magic to the Magic Association. The association urgently dispatched 5 great mages, which together limited the expansion of the infected area. It can be said that without the count's timely communication, the area of this infected area would have been much larger than what we see now. Are you trying to persuade me to follow the example of that count? Xiahou Yan stared into Master Laurie's eyes, and also left his own people to escape alone. I don't advise you to do anything, Master Laurie shook his head. But I think you need to know a historical fact. That count, due to his timely reporting, not only did not receive imperial punishment, but was instead promoted to duke. Not long after, he was also rewarded by His Majesty the Emperor with another fiefdom. The capital of that fiefdom, named Eagle's Castle. Lord Elliot, the count I am referring to, is named Henry Igor. He is the ancestor of your Igor family and the founder of their glorious history. All the wealth, honor, and shelter your family has enjoyed for 800 years can be attributed to him. Xiahou Yan was completely stunned. I know you want to use necromancy to resurrect Captain Alice and other guards, and escape from the infected area with everyone, Master Laurie said earnestly. But the number of soldiers under Count Henry Igor back then was more than 100 times that of us today. Even so, they couldn't escape from the zombie tide. Lord Elliot, even if you can resurrect all the fallen time and time again, your magic will always be exhausted one day, and zombies are endless. What you are trying to do is a hopeless game. Master Laurie patted the Lord's shoulder and whispered. Lord Elliot, the vast majority of these 500 people in the camp are destined to die in this infected area, but you still have a chance to escape. Like your ancestors, the choice you face is simply to let one person live alone or let everyone sacrifice together, and this is a simple multiple-choice question. Xiahou Yan felt a tightness in his chest and saw a tent labeled "Morgue" appear at the corner. He grabbed onto a life-saving straw and interrupted Master Laurie's words. Master Laurie, let's first experiment with the resurrection technique. As for your suggestion of letting me leave my lord and escape alone, please allow me to reconsider. Master Laurie gave him a deep glance, then silently took 2 steps forward and lifted the curtain of the tent for the Lord. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. No one really thinks resurrection is difficult, right? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. No one really thinks resurrection is difficult, right? As soon as he entered the tent, Xiahou Yan saw 5 human corpses lying side by side on the ground. Master, are there only 5 corpses here? He stared at the silent faces of the dead guards, feeling a palpitations for no reason, and quickly turned his head to ask. The tide of corpses is extremely dangerous, it's already great to be able to retrieve 5 corpses. Master Laurie glanced at the corpses on the ground, his expression unchanged. The master turned around and hung the lion lantern in his hand high, allowing the light to illuminate the entire space. He then shrugged and continued, saying, Zombies have a special love for biting human flesh, and few humans who have been attacked by a zombie wave can preserve their entire body like this. Xiahou Yan nodded, feeling a little heavy again. At present, there are only 5 corpses of guards, and even if they can all be successfully resurrected like Alice, the increase in combat power brought to the convoy is still only a drop in the bucket compared to the terrifying number of zombies. Xiahou Yan was not in a hurry to start experimenting with magic, but squatted down and examined the corpses of the guards. The first things that caught his attention were the clothes and pants of the guards, which had already been stained with blood, and the huge wounds that led to their deaths. Similar to Alice, these wounds have uneven edges and extremely terrifying lengths, but the locations of the wounds on several corpses are different. Some on the head, some on the chest, and one corpse's abdomen has been completely opened, revealing blood-red internal organs. It is already late autumn and the weather is relatively cold. It has not been too long since the time of death, so the bodies of the guards have not completely stiffened yet. When Xiahou Yan pressed their body surface with his fingers, he could still feel a faint softness. But the temperature felt at his fingertips was icy, proving that the breath of life had already passed away from these bodies. Xiahou Yan did not pay much attention to the condition of the corpses. In fact, he was more concerned about the equipment worn by these guards during their lifetime. The 5 corpses in front of me were dressed in similar attire. They were wearing mismatched leather armor on their upper bodies and plain cotton pants on their lower bodies. Compared to Captain Alice's chain armor, these ordinary guards' equipment looked much cheaper. Xiahou Yan reached out and pinched a piece of leather armor. The surface of the armor was full of scratches, and the texture was not hard, which made Xiahou Yan couldn't help but doubt the level of its craftsmanship and the actual protective ability of this leather armor in battle. He looked around and found that these simple leather armor pieces were adorned with iron plates on key areas such as the chest to enhance safety, but it is obvious that the leather armor maker's little thought ultimately failed to block the zombies' teeth and claws for the guards. These leather armor were temporarily purchased by the guard team from the market when they departed from Eagle's Breath Castle, explained Master Laurie on the side. The Empire does not allow us to take any weapons or armor from our original territory. Xiahou Yan nodded, reached his hand to the waist of the corpse, untied the sword hanging from his belt, and lifted it to his eyes to examine. The sword is not equipped with a scabbard, and the handle is only wrapped in a few loops of cowhide. As for the most crucial part of the blade, it appears to be polished very sharply, but the metal color of the blade is mottled and there are also visible fine notches on the blade, all of which indicate that the quality of the steel used for casting the sword is really worrying. In short, a defective and unusable handle. At present, the equipment level of the guard team is like this. Master Laurie shrugged behind the Lord, his tone strange. Xiahou Yan knew what the master meant inside and outside. With this kind of garbage equipment, even if you resurrect these guards, what can you do? Have you ever fought against extremely vicious zombies? Lord, why don't you hurry and run away on your own? Xiahou Yan ignored the master's implied meaning. After thinking for a moment, he realized that there was nothing left to see about the body. He stood up, took 2 steps back, and then took out the book, Essentials of Necromancies, from his arms. Master Laurie glanced at the cover of the book, but did not read it much or show any curiosity. According to the tradition of the wizarding world, the collection of books by wizards is a forbidden area that is absolutely untouchable and will not be allowed to be touched by other wizards. Master Laurie was indeed curious about this book, Essentials of Necromancies, but as a magician accompanying Lord, the master politely chose to avoid suspicion and did not ask much. Xiahou Yan flipped back to the chapter, Resurrection Technique, from Essence of Necromancies, and nodded nervously at Master Laurie. Master Laurie gave the Lord an encouraging look. Xiahou Yan walked up to the central corpse, took a deep breath, and then began reading the spell of resurrection loudly according to the record in the book. The vast majority of magical spells are written in complex, Ionian ancient magic script, and recognizing this eerie and distorted ancient script is almost the first lesson in the learning career of all wizards. Although the grades in the school city were not ideal, reading ancient magic texts was still a fundamental skill that could not defeat second-level mage Elliot Igor. Xiahou Yan earnestly recited the resurrection spell from the book, one obscure and awkward ancient magic script syllable after another, fluently exhaling from his mouth. Soon, a magical tide appeared inside the tent that only the magician could perceive. Master Laurie stood on the side, carefully experiencing the magical fluctuations in the air. Until now, the degree of these fluctuations is still not strong, not exceeding the level of magical resonance that second-level junior mages can evoke. What is the Lord doing? The master furrowed his brow. Then, the master saw a scene he would never forget. When the last syllable of the resurrection spell was pronounced by the Lord, a huge humanoid phantom appeared unpredictably above the corpse. Master Laurie almost bit his tongue. Summoning a phantom while casting means the magician is communicating with the controlling deity corresponding to the magic attribute. This is an exclusive illusion that only triggers when attempting to cast 7th level or higher master level magic. Lord, you are indeed trying to cast the Grandmaster level magic, resurrection technique. The master stared at the Lord in amazement, not even noticing that the image of the phantom in the air was not the black-robed death corresponding to the dark magic, but a tall and slightly bloated stranger. Master Laurie neglected to see it for a moment, but Xiahou Yan, who was already prepared, saw it clearly on his own. That damn phantom is the Yen Prince. There cannot be a second deity in the world, wearing a wide-sleeved black robe, a ebony crown on the head, and a gloomy and serious Eastern face with an unrecognizable expression. Why did you, the elderly, also travel with me? Xiahou Yan stared at the virtual shadow of the king of Yan in the air, but ultimately did not dare to ask. The image of the king of hell was fleeting, and soon the magical fluctuations in the tent completely subsided, restoring everything to calm. Xiahou Yan and Master Laurie had a deep understanding and turned their heads to stare at the corpse in the center of the tent. Unfortunately, the guard who died in the tide of corpses and his body was half stiff, under the joint gaze of the Igor family leader and chief mage. First the wound on his chest quickly healed, and then he sat up unsteadily from the oilcloth where the corpse was lying. The guard, who appeared to be only in his 20s, reached out and rubbed his eyes before noticing the two important figures standing in front of him. The guard was stunned for a moment and asked in confusion. "Lord! Your Highness! Master Laurie! Where am I? Where is the corpse tied?" Xiahou Yan swallowed his saliva and was about to answer when he felt Master Laurie poking him in the back. Then, the Lord was filled with fear and discovered that the bodies of the other 4 guards next to him were also sitting up straight from the ground one after another. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The Moment of the Elder Magician's Collapse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. The moment of the Elder Magician's collapse. Victor Laurie, the chief mage of the Igor family, believed that he had enough knowledge in his lifetime. He has seen things that ordinary people cannot believe. He had seen the magical lights suddenly blooming at the top of the white pointed tower in the school city. He also watched Saint Ferenc walk alone into the dark abyss. He has seen the moonlight of the imperial capital and the sunrise of Shenmue City. He once carried the continuous heavy snowfall in Beiwang County. He has also tasted the sea breeze of Eagle's Breath Castle, which always carries a fishy smell, but he did not expect that. His Lord Elliot Igor had released a group resurrection technique. Master Victor Laurie's mind was blank, staring foolishly at the absurd scene before him. 5 Igor family guards who died in the tide of corpses and had no reason to survive are now standing in front of the master, jumping and jumping around. These lackluster guards boasted to their colleagues about how many zombies they had chopped down before death, while allowing the Lord to check their pulse and temperature, when the Lord solemnly announced that these resurrected guards, like Captain Alice, were in a state of lifeless death with no heartbeat and cold body temperature. These guards were surprisingly delighted and even compared their body temperature to someone else. Master Laurie felt that compared to these guards who were celebrating their resurrection, he, a terrible old man in his 70s and 80s, was actually lifeless like a zombie. The master asked himself, even if Lord had just successfully resurrected the guard, he would not be too surprised. After all, there are already examples of successfully reviving Captain Alice, with Zhuyu at the forefront. Lord, surprisingly, just recite a spell and resurrect 5 people at once. 5. His mother 5. Master Laurie suddenly felt that the genius necromancer in history was not worth it. If he had known how easy it was to resurrect the deceased, why would that genius wizard have conducted such a dark magic experiment that it led to a big mistake? As the Lord humbly accepted the sincere thanks from the guards, almost giving his acceptance speech, Master Laurie could no longer bear it and grabbed the opponent's sleeve. Lord Elliot, how are you feeling now? Me. Xiahou Yan felt that the master was a bit puzzled. Of course everything goes as usual. It's not me who has been resurrected. What can be abnormal about my feelings? Master. I feel abnormal. A guard who was known for his humor and love for telling cold jokes during his lifetime raised his hand. I'm cold. Shut up, I didn't ask you. Master Laurie roared angrily, causing the guards to shrink their heads in fear. To be honest, they have never seen Mr. Chief Mage so angry before. Seeing that the guards dared not speak up, Master Laurie continued to grasp the Lord's arm and asked carefully. Lord Elliot, I'm asking, do you have any feeling of dizziness, chi deficiency, difficulty breathing, or more seriously, do you feel like you're about to die? No. Xiahou Yan frowned, feeling that the old man's words were really unpleasant. My current physical condition, not to mention boundless life, can at least be considered relatively healthy. What's the problem? That's strange. Master Laurie pinched his chin. What do you mean? Xiahou Yan angrily said, do you think it's normal for me to be on the brink of death? Master Laurie quickly shook his head and denied. No, Lord Elliot, that's not what I meant. But I have to tell you something. Theoretically, resurrection belongs to master-level magic, which means only 7th level and above mages can cast it. But in fact, even 7th level, advanced mages do not use master-level magic in life. Do you know why? Why? Xiahou Yan asked foolishly. Grandmaster-level magic. This topic goes beyond the knowledge scope of a certain 2nd-level mage, because the magic consumption of master-level magic is too high. Master Laurie was furious and shook his grip on the Lord's shoulder. Look, magicians are divided into 9 classes. Magic apprentices, junior mages, intermediate mages, senior mages, junior mages, intermediate mages, senior mages, grand mages, and holy mages. Every time they cross a class, the amount of magic in the magician's body increases tenfold. Oh. And then what? Xiahou Yan was a bit dizzy when the master shook him. And he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. After studying at the Mage Academy for 7 or 8 years with Elliot Igor, he finally became a 2nd-level junior mage. Damn it, a high-level mage in the 7th level has a magic storage capacity that is 100,000 times that of a junior mage like you. However, casting master-level magic such as resurrection will also drain nearly half of their magic. Therefore, it is often the 8th-level mage whose magic capacity can support the daily use of master-level magic. So, Xiahou Yan didn't understand where the master's focus was. Lord Elliot, you his mother resurrected 5 living people at a time. 5. Master Laurie reached out his hand and shook it. Xiahou Yan almost thought that the other side would slap his face. According to the truth, the magic consumption of your casting this time should be more than 5 times that of a single resurrection. 5 times the magic of casting resurrection spells. Xiahou Yan calculated briefly in his mind. 1 resurrection spell will consume half of the 7th-level mage's magic. The amount of magic in the 7th-level, advanced mage's body is 100,000 times that of this 2nd-level, junior mage, so, resurrecting 5 people at once, the theoretical magic consumption is about the total amount of magic existing in one's own body 250,000 times. Xiahou Yan almost bit his tongue. That's not to mention, your resurrection technique doesn't resurrect people into zombies, but into living beings with thinking abilities. Maybe the magic consumption will be even more. Master Laurie felt his worldview was collapsing. With such a huge amount of magic consumption, theoretically, you should have been drained of your body's magic and your feet should have been burping long ago. But I'm still alive. Xiahou Yan lowered his head and checked himself, feeling no abnormalities. That's the problem. Master Laurie was about to cry, the magic in your body has not been consumed at all. Magic cannot appear out of thin air. Where did you get the massive magic you need to resurrect 5 people at once? Xiahou Yan was also a bit confused. Indeed, he did not feel any change in the magic within his body. Where did the magic consumed by the resurrection technique he used just now come from? Did Huabei borrow it? Did it come from a credit card? Did you snatch it from the bank? At this moment, Xiahou Yan suddenly remembered the virtual shadow of the Yan Luo king just now. This matter shouldn't be related to the king of hell, right? Xiahou Yan carefully pondered for a moment, and the more he thought about it, the more likely he felt that. After all, the biggest difference between the resurrection spells he cast these 2 times and the genuine resurrection spells is that the summoned divine phantom has transformed from the Grim Reaper, who controls the power of the underworld, to the Yen Prince on earth. Perhaps even if the king of Yen Luo bestowed blessings and provided the magic needed for casting spells for Xiahou Yan. However, given the intricate connections between the king of hell and the earth due to the professional ethics of the traveler, Xiahou Yan wisely remained silent. Only Master Laurie was left with a dull gaze squatting on the ground, his face filled with doubts about life. In order to comfort his chief mage, Xiahou Yan had to pat Master Laurie's shoulder and tentatively ask. Master, if you haven't figured out what's going on, why don't I try again to show you? Are there any extra corpses in the camp? Victor Laurie, the chief mage of the Igor family, felt like he was showing signs of a cerebral hemorrhage. End of this chapter.